You have a pension and you have to make a decision. Do you take monthly payments, known as an annuity, or do you take the lump sum, where all of a sudden you get this big lump of money and you can invest it as you see fit? A lot of people want that guaranteed income through the monthly income sources, and I think it makes sense for a lot of people. Other times, the lump sum is a clear answer, and today I'm going to show you the framework so you make sure that you make the right decision. My name is Ari, I'm a financial planner, and all I do is help people retire early. I'm the host of the Early Retirement Podcast, and I'm also the Vice President here at Root. We're going to put up the review of the week that was on Apple Podcasts this week. I'll do this every now and then when I think it's an applicable one. I'm going to put it right here, but I'm going to look down so you can see what I'm looking at. This comes from someone whose username is frustrated a lot. Hopefully you're not, because you're on track to retire early. Ari covers topics that help me think what is needed to possibly retire early. Each week has a great topic that he reviews and uses great examples to make it real. Thanks, Ari, for helping make sure I considered things I had not considered for an early retirement. So you're very welcome. And once again, my podcast episodes come out every single Monday. And if you're looking for the YouTube content, you can, of course, tune in here. Podcast episode also released on Mondays. Once again, this annuity versus lump sum can be a difficult decision, especially when interest rates are going up. We need to think about this even more because it can make a really big impact if we choose the wrong one. So here's what's going on in your head. I'm just going to take a guess here. You really want to make sure that you make the right decision over the course of your lifetime. What's going to put more money in your pocket? Is it the guaranteed monthly income sources or is it the lump sum? Now with the lump sum, just so you're aware, you can take that lump sum and move it into an IRA. There's no taxes that occur, completely tax-free. When you take out the money, you pay taxes. But if they said, here's $1 million lump sum option, you move that into an IRA. That's how that would work. Let's look at an example. And I'm going to look down here at my screen here at my notes, but I'm going to put them right here so you can see and we can follow along. So let's assume your first option is you could take the annuity option of a pension, and that would provide $4,351 a month. Guaranteed, that's your annuity income source. That's option one. And that ignores any interim supplement like some people have plans. Don't worry about that. That's just $4,351 a month. That's option one. Option two is you could take a lump sum and let's just say $1 million. Let's keep it super simple, $1 million. And so essentially, what would that withdrawal rate transfer to? Now, a lot of people will look at it in the following way. Let's annualize it first to just be really clear here. I'm bringing up my calculator, 4,351 times 12 months. That's $52,212, okay? So you could have a guaranteed $52,212, or you could take a lump sum of $1 million. A lot of people will say the following, wow, $52,212, that beats the standard withdrawal rates that people talk about with their investment. So a lot of people talk about the 4% rule. I don't think the 4% rule is as applicable as what's called the guardrails approach, which I have another video on, but let's use the 4% rule to make it super simple here. The 4% rule says you can take out 4%. It ignores taxes and things like that, a few other aspects of investing, but the real point of the message here is 4% is what you could take from $1 million, and be rest assured you could create income for 30 years. Traditional retirement. It's not great for an early retirement like a lot of you, but let's just use it as a base case here. So 4% of $1 million is $40,000 versus the annuity option, $52,212. So it seems pretty clear so far, but it's not the right comparison, and here's why. The 4% rule increases with inflation. It assumes that you are growing with inflation. And so the first year you can take out $40,000. The next year you could take out $41,040, just assuming a basic inflation rate. So it's growing with inflation. Now, most non-government pensions do not include that. Okay, not all, but most of them. So right off the bat, it looks like a no-brainer. Let's take $52,212 instead of taking 4% of $1 million, let's call it $40,000. But 10 years in, here's what you see. A 4% withdrawal rate would generate $53,297 a year. So it would take 10 years for you to go, wow, the 4% rule would make a whole lot more sense than my annuity. Annuity is still generating that same $52,212. In year 20, the 4% rule, assuming you followed it, would generate $71,627 a year versus the annuity, which once again is still bringing $52,212. And by year 30, so 30 years later, your 4% rule option would bring $96,261 in versus the $52,212. Now, a lot of people hear that and go, hey, I'd rather have more of this money up front. because in the future, I'm not going to travel to the same degree. And I just like the guaranteed income source. For a lot of people, by the way, it plays a role. I know a lot of advisors now always take the lump sum. I don't really believe in always. It just depends on your plan. Some people go, all right, I love the idea of having guaranteed income coming in. Yeah, maybe it doesn't make sense financially if I live 30, 40 plus years, but for the next 10, 15 years, I'd feel a whole lot better. And I've got other investments and maybe I'm not optimizing on paper, but I'd feel better. Okay, great. Let's not discount that feeling, but let's still go through my full analysis. And here's the key. The 4% distribution is not increasing to the same degree that your monthly income is decreasing. We always have to look at the real return. So the real return is after inflation. What are we actually ending up with? What the 4% rule does is it increases with inflation. So it's maintaining your purchasing power as opposed to your guaranteed monthly income payments through the annuity. Every single year, we're losing out to inflation. So not only is this growing over here, we're losing out over here. Here's what I didn't discuss yet. That option I gave you, that $52,212, that option of guaranteed monthly income through the annuity, that doesn't take into account looking at survivor option. So what if there's a 75% survivor option? If something happens to you, 75% would go to your spouse. Well, that would decrease the amount. What if there was a 50% option? Well, that would decrease the amount because if something happened, you'd want to make sure they were taken care of. Let's assume that you elect the single life annuity. That would be the greatest possible annuity. That means the greatest possible amount. So let's just take a super basic example. Let's say that was $6,000 a month. And let's assume that you died after 1 year. You would have paid into this annuity, essentially working there for many, many years, and gotten $6,000 a month for 1 year. You would have gotten $72,000 a year and left everything else on the table. That's why a lot of people choose the 50% joint and survivor option so that it's a smaller amount, but if something happens, it goes to their partner. Now let's assume you pick that option, that 50% joint and survivor option. But if something happens to both of you, nothing gets left to children at all. And maybe you're working together and you're living together and everything's great and you're doing different things. And then in 10 years, something drastic happens. Well, now all of a sudden, you only got 10 years worth of payments that should have created 30 or 40 years. And it even could have been a legacy play as well. But let's not stop there. I just kind of explained how not to think about it. It's like an apples to oranges comparison. Let's look at now how should we think about it. And here's how I want you to think through it. It's called the imputed rate of return. Okay, I want you to think of the imputed rate of return. So we go, Ari, is that even English? And you've probably heard my dopey joke, but I went to a doctor a few months back actually now. I said, hey, doc, that sounded great. The way you explained that, I loved it. It sounded really good, but I have no idea what you just said. Okay, so talk to me like I'm 5. And that's what I'm gonna do with you now. Because to me, all this can sound great if I use fancy words, but if you don't know what I'm talking about, how helpful is it really? Your imputed rate of return is going to be different if you live 1 year versus 30 years. So your imputed rate of return is essentially how good did we do based on how long we lived. That's a simple way of looking at it. So I've got my numbers here on my sheet. I'm going to look down and I'm going to put them on the screen here. If you died after 1 year, in this example here, it's the equivalent of investing $1 million, receiving one annual payment of $52,212, and then your investment is worth 0 after that because we're gone. That would be a rate of return of negative 94.9%. If you live for 10 years in this example and passed away after that, it's the equivalent of investing $1 million, receiving 10 payments of $52,212, then having $0 left over. That's a negative 10.6 imputed rate of return. At 20 years, it's a 0.2%. At 30 years, it's 3% rate of return. So after 30 years, your average return, imputed rate of return, would be 3%. The longer you live, the greater imputed rate of return. If you live 40 years or 50 years, it would be even greater because you're getting more of those payments for a longer period of time. If you retire right away, pass away right away, only receive that income for a very small period of time, you really didn't get a great benefit out of it. So here's the question we have to ask ourselves. Could we outperform a negative 94.9% return in 1 year? I think we can. Could you outperform 0.2% over 20 years? Could you outperform 3% over 30 years. Those are the numbers to use as your benchmark to compare. But most financial advisors that I listen to, because I listen to a lot of podcasts myself as well, they stop there. They go, hey, that's kind of the analysis without thinking about how much easier you're going to sleep knowing there is guaranteed income. And if we're relying entirely on this pension to cover your needs in retirement, we need to do a full analysis. But more often than not, you might have another income source. Maybe there's rental income. Maybe there's Social Security. Maybe there's a healthy portfolio balance outside of this that you're counting on in your retirement. And you can use that to create income, which allows you to have this guaranteed income source. And it can feel really nice to have different income sources coming from different spots. So don't let the analysis fully dictate your decision. Let it inform you, be intentional and be wise about it, but it doesn't mean you just have to do what the numbers say. There are so many other considerations here. Looking at tax, looking at estate planning, look at all these different things, but just high level, if we're looking at this example here, do we take $52,212 every year? Do we take the lump sum? The lump sum is going to benefit you more often than not. It's the question of, can we do better than 3% over the course of 30 years? And there's very rare circumstances, unless you're investing really poorly, will you or not outperform that. And really, it's beyond just you. It's a legacy play, where if something happened to you, would you want your children to be able to still continue to use these dollars you work so hard for to be able to do more good? And more often than not, people are taking the lump sum option, especially with interest rates rising. When interest rates rise, your lump sum amount is going to decrease. So this is going to make the analysis look different. We might want to say, wow, that pension looks a whole lot more attractive now, but we need to rerun the analysis. And sometimes if a pension would go down from $1 million to $800,000, but you could work and make $150,000, sometimes it makes sense to say, hey, do we collect the pension now, find another job, maybe it doesn't pay the same amount, but it pays less, but you're taking this greater pension amount, versus continuing to work, make $150,000, but really it's a net loss of $50,000 because your pension went down from $1 million to $800,000, but you made $150,000. So we didn't quite make up that difference. There's other factors here. Maybe staying longer allows you to be able to do more 401k contributions, and your plan is to continue working. Maybe it's, no, Ari, I am done. And because of that, I need to make sure that I can turn this on most effectively. And yeah, I am going to stop working now. Maybe it's one less year of working and I wasn't ready to retire, but if I don't retire because rates are rising, my lump sum balance that I'm planning on taking would be so much less. So I need to start considering taking this now. Once again, that's only if you want to take the lump sum. So that summarizes how I think through pension, lump sum, annuity, what makes most sense. I want to make sure that you make the right decision. And there's all these different factors here of, are there other income sources? How much do you want to spend? When does it get turned on? What is your health like? How do you make sure that you leave enough for legacy if that's important to you? I want you to think through this fully, but hopefully this is a helpful framework as a basic example. If you're interested in having a custom strategy so that your pension is speaking with all other aspects of your plan, reach out to myself or another planner here at Root, and that's what we'd love to do. You can see my link in the description below so I can help you optimize your finances for an early retirement. Once again, if this video is helpful, please do like this video and share it so more people can have confidence in their early retirement.